Hello, everyone. My name is Tina Hotchkiss, and I'm an artist here in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I'm inspired by nature, landscapes, botanicals. I'm also inspired by how the light travels through trees, through the flowers, the flower petals, how form is captured by that light. So I really like to examine that and want to create the form that the light captures. I'm also inspired by making those active lines over my watercolor, putting a little bit of me in there with actual color to kind of spice it up a bit. So I hope you join me for these exciting classes. Thanks. Bye.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kathleen. I'm with Etcher Studio. I'll be your host for today. And for those who are new with Etcher, we are an outlearning platform who works with art teachers from all across the globe. And today's free demo is brought to you by one of our proud resident artists, Tina Hotchkiss. And she's also, this works rather as a preview for her 90-minute class, which is already up on our YouTube channel. I'm going to be dropping that link actually right here if you're wondering, or if you're curious already. And I'll go ahead and let Tina talk about that in a few seconds. So before we begin, if we have any questions, just type them in all capital letters in the chat so that I could easily defer them from the rest of the comments. And if you're going to be following along today, please check out the chat. I will be dropping useful links and also our private Facebook group. If in any case you'd wish to share as what you did today, you could go ahead and search Etcher Studio Fam, or I'll also drop that link in the chat. So without further ado, Tina, could you let us know what you'll be doing today and how that connects to your Etcher class?
Oh, yes. I want to thank Etcher for having me today. It's always a pleasure. And today we're going to be painting a leaf. We're using a very high contrast, a black background that is going to work really well with our watercolor. And it's a lot of fun to do. And this is actually what we're painting today. The master's class will be going just a step further, and we'll see that this is our line drawing. And then we also have flowers that were done in the same manner. And this is what the master's class or the mini workshop will be. And we're getting started here. We're using black gesso. Gesso is a ground. So it's a mat that will give us the tooth of the paper back so that we can apply our watercolor or our color pencil to that. I added a little bit of water to my brush, so I dipped it in water, and then now I'm applying the black gesso. You want to make sure that you have a nice line flow through. Did you have a question?
Yeah, we've got a question so early. Will
Sure.
black acrylic paint be okay if we don't have black gesso?
Oh, I was just going to get into that because I always get that
Gotcha.
question. Always get that question. Acrylic paint, it's not a nice foundation for me to put the color pencil down. That's why I like the black gesso. It is actually a ground. We prime our canvases with white gesso. It's a ground. So it's giving us kind of the texture, that paper back. I think acrylic has more of a plastic, and it clogs up the pores of the paper. And when you apply your color pencil over that, it's not as even. So I do recommend using the gesso. I've also get the question about using ink.
Yeah.
And you can use ink. but again, it's not as consistent. The surface of the paper is not as consistent. So sometimes the texture that we have of the paper isn't what I'm really looking for with ink or with any other type of paint than black gesso. I used to use ink. And then when I first started with this black gesso, I haven't gone back to ink for the application for big areas like this. I learned about the black gesso from a color pencil artist. Her name is Diane. I'm going to spell her last name for you. It's Locati. She's a she works with watercolor underpaintings or flow acrylic underpainting, and then adds black gesso and color pencil. So that's where I first learned or was shown this technique. Now, as I'm applying the black gesso, I am dipping my brush into water to make sure that the black gesso is a consistency that I can make a nice line with. And you'll see that I go back and forth from the black gesso, and then you'll see that I go to the water, like right there where I get some skips, I went to the water, and now it applies more smoothly. Very important, I'm using the Etchers number 3 round brush, the real small brush. And now I'm going to the number 12 to do the big area.
You know, we've got like we've got a lovely discovery from one of our audience right here. Kimberly says, or was asking actually if you can add black paint to white gesso, and it seems to be working. What can you say about that?
Oh, I never even thought of that. Is it giving it more of a gray though?
We'll have to ask. Kimberly, let us know in the chat.
Yeah, because that's the only thing that I would be concerned about, that it's gray. It's not actually black. Gray might be kind of cool to work with too. But you can see that, you can even see here from where it's wet that the texture of the paper is still there. And that's what I like about that. Now, the black gesso is, when it dries, you can, if you scrape your fingernail across it, it's going to make a mark. So when you're done with your painting in the black areas, sometimes I do touch it up a little bit, and then I spray an archival spray over top, and it keeps it from doing that. And I'll talk more about that in the mini workshop. If we have any questions and stuff about that. You just want to make sure that this is very evenly distributed, all black. And before you watercolor or do color pencil, you want to make sure that it is dry. Now I'm going back with our the Etchers small brush, number 3. And I want to do a active line here, and we'll talk more about this in the workshop too. And I'll talk about what an active line is. We want to make sure that our lines are have some personality to them. And you'll see that I'm going to be thickening up some of the lines and making some of them thin. Here I've got a thin line as I go. I'm barely touching the paper to get to that tip of the brush. And then you'll see where I push the brush down to make a thick line, and I'll point that out when that happens. I like to put skips too. Here's the thick. It's going to go thick. See how I press down? There's the thick line, thick, and then go into thin. That's what, that's an active line. And to get those thin areas, I sometimes roll the brush a bit on my finger. And I do that when I apply color pencil too. There we go, a thick line. And in these lines, I'm kind of thinking of branches, where this leaf came from. So I'm kind of making these veins have a little bit of a personality of what a tree might have too. I don't know if you've noticed, but the veins kind of represent those the shape of the tree structure too. So that's kind of what I'm trying to apply here. Made it thicker at the so-called root area of the tree and coming down the stem and making those lines be just a bit more interesting than keeping them the same width everywhere.
We've got an update from Kim saying it's very black. So Kim, if you want to share that on our Facebook group, how you get the proportions for both black paint and white gesso, we'd be very interested too. And we've got a question from Pippi saying, wait, why not use black watercolor paper?
Then you'd have to find white. The white of the paper is very important here. I've never used black watercolor paper. I guess you could cut out a white leaf and do it this way, but then your blacks aren't going to match, you know, the blacks that I'm painting on here. And I want them to match. I like the opacity of the black gesso and how it's so different than the watercolor. The transparent watercolor, fabulous. Now it's all dry. And I'm using a squirt bottle to put little puddles of water. I just tickled the trigger of the squirt bottle, and you can see all the little puddles of water that came on here. And I'm using a Escoda Perla brush here and applying my first color, which is the Quinzerdone Gold. And since I used the squirt bottle to give me this texture of leaving white of the paper where the water did not touch the paper, and just charging in the color in those puddles, this is giving me a random texture. Kind of like what you would see the sky holes in trees. That's the texture that I'm going for here. So leaving parts of the white of the paper is very, very important. So again, those white areas are where the paper is dry. Now I'm charging in with another yellow, which is new Gouache yellow. The gold is more of a warm yellow, and then this is a little bit cooler. You kind of don't get that on the video, but in person you definitely would. And now I'm adding my green, which is green apatite genuine, which has a lot of granulation in it, so it gives me a texture. And with these leaf paintings, I'm hoping that you do more than one. This is a wonderful way to just practice all your watercolor skills. We're not really looking at form on this leaf. We're just celebrating the translucency of the watercolor and the opacity of the black gesso. Adding just a little bit more of that yellow pigment. I want to get a lot of pigment on my piece because it is so white or so wet that we know that watercolor dries lighter. Now I'm adding the permanent rose, and it's mixing in with the yellows to make this, adding a little bit more of the green. And where that mixes with the red, we're going to get this really nice neutral color because they're two opposite colors mixing together, and that gives us our neutrals. And now adding some phthalo blue-green shade, and I splattered that by loading my brush and tapping it on my finger. Adding more water with the trigger water bottle. And remember, I'm just tickling that trigger. And now I'm going to move those colors around. Look how fabulous the colors are mixing. But leaving some white areas. You see those white areas? That's dry paper. You can really see that there's dry paper there. And that was using with that trigger water bottle, gave me those. Just moving that around, mixing those colors together to get those neutral browns and grays. And now that it's really wet here, I'm going to take some of the water off by using, and it's coming. Here it is. There's the Kleenex coming, and I'm just rolling it across, not rubbing, just rolling it across. And it gives me these wonderful textures. Look at the browns that I have there.
Yeah.
The neutrals.
Yeah, it makes it looks more organic, I guess.
Yes, yes.
Natural.
It's very organic because I use the trigger water bottle to give me those areas of leaving the white paper. This is really important, is leaving some of that white. Now I'm charging in. My paper is a little bit drier because I use the Kleenex, but it's still very wet. You see that the water is traveling. So that tells you that when I was putting that Kleenex on there, I was rolling it very lightly. Here I'm adding just more bold colors over top of those beautiful neutrals that I created. And you can take this as far as you want. I do recommend that as you're experimenting like this, because, you know, that's what we are. Watercolors experiment all the time. And you might want to take pictures along the way so that you can say, oh, I should have stopped, you know, then I really liked what I had. And so that when you do another one, so I do recommend doing a study of different leaves and coming up, practicing your watercolor techniques this way. Now I'm going to slightly dry the area. I'm not going to dry it all the way. I don't want my Quinzerdone Gold, I'm putting that in. And you see that it's not traveling quite as far now because my paper's not as wet as it was. It's giving me some deeper tones by doing that. So you need to really know about the wetness of your paper and when to apply your paint. The hard edges that I have here are by the white areas are my hard edges. Everything else is really contained or really flowing through. Now I'm using a quill brush as an eyedropper. I loaded it up with water and then dropped water across there. And you can see that it's how it's moving around. Using a thirsty brush to take up some of the puddles.
I heard petals. I'm sorry. It was puddles.
Petals. Did I say petals? Puddles.
Yeah, I heard petals. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was puddles.
I could have said that. Oh, yeah. Charging in some more deeper colors because we know that when our watercolor dries, it's just not as deep as when it was wet. So just pulling that in. And just can't resist playing more.
Yeah.
Just keep playing. Playing more. Yes.
That's
But you
actually
do see that I still have those white areas.
Oh.
Now I'm pushing the color around with the hair dryer. So you do have to be careful when you are using the hair dryer. If it's puddly like that, it will. Now you need to make sure that it's bone dry. It's got to be completely dry. You can see that some of my watercolor, you can see some of the puddles of the watercolor out in the black gesso. I could have gone in and painted black gesso on there to get rid of those, but I decided not to. I'm adding my color pencil right now, and I'm using Lilac. It's a Prismacolor pencil, the Prismacolor Premium Professional Pencils. And you can see that I'm rolling the pencil on my finger a little bit. And the reason why I do that is to keep that sharp edge. The color pencils are so soft that that you lose your point. And rolling the pencil on my finger a bit helps even that out, and I don't get a flat edge. And I'm using moderate pressure, not real light, but not pushing as hard as I can. And I just love this lilac color next to the green. Just a beautiful accent.
We've got a question from Teresa saying, does it make a difference if you use wax or oil-based colored pencils for this stage?
No. The oil-based pencils are wonderful to use also. This is a wax-based pencil. I use both. I do love the oil-based. The oil-based pencils are softer. And now I am doing like where the shadow would be. So I'm just outlining. I'm kind of giving it a graphic feel here. Right on the black gesso. Do you see how fabulous the color pencil marks are on this black gesso with the tooth of the gesso?
Exactly. I think it's also the reason why you prefer gesso on top of ink or acrylic.
Exactly. It's very even. For me, ink, for some reasons, will clog up the paper not very evenly. So you'll end up with spots where the color pencil doesn't apply as well as on other spots. So that's what I didn't like about the ink. But it could have been inks that I was using. I don't know. I didn't try experiment with a bunch of inks. So somebody might, there's millions of ways of doing everything. So you might find a better way, but this is the way that I have found. And now I am going to add some white gouache. I had some gouache here that was already dry, so I'm just adding water to it. It's probably better to use it right from the tube, but I had this right there on my table, so I just went ahead and decided to use this. So I'm just getting the consistency that I want, and I'm going to do some splattering across here to add some spontaneous marks.
Ooh, got
And
lovely
it's
comments
so
about.
much fun. It's so much fun. This makes me just want to paint now.
Exactly.
Right.
I think that's what everybody feels right now in the chat. We've got some lovely comments right here, which I'll be reading out real soon. But
And then here we're taking this off. So isn't this a wonderful play with something that is just so opaque and so flat as the black gesso? And then that watercolor transparency in the play of watercolor. And then having the organization of those lines with the color pencil. It's just a delightful combination.
oh, that looks amazing. It's an automatic high contrast.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And we just played with watercolor. We weren't concerned. In this case, we weren't concerned about the form of the leaf. We're just playing here. And what a really wonderful way. So the most important thing with the watercolor here are leaving the white spots. So this is what we're going to be doing for our 90 minutes.
Gosh.
Yes. And believe me, we're going to be painting up a storm to be able to do this in 90 minutes, but it's just so much fun.
Great. Oh my gosh. I'll go ahead and just bring us back on screen for Q&A. We've got lovely question comment from Teresa. Tina, you're amazing. I just discovered you in the live feedback session and you've got me excited about all these projects.
That's very nice. Oh my gosh, the live feedback session was so much fun. I had so much fun looking at everybody's work. Awesome. I'd love to hear about when you guys paint with me. So yeah, please post what you come up with.
Yeah. If you followed along today, I'm gonna be posting the link that the hashtag that you can use. And also Tina's what do you call this? Instagram handle. So you can tag her on Instagram or on our private Facebook group as well. And before we answer some questions, again, Tina's 90-minute class is already up on our website, up on our YouTube channel. So yes, you heard it right. We are streaming the 90-minute class on our YouTube live. That's going to be on June 28th. So make sure you've got that marked on your calendar so that we'll be able to see you there. And I think it's time for questions. Tina, could you expound on what else you'll be doing or talking about during the 90-minute class?
Yes, we're going to be talking more about notan, which is the black and white, and also thinking about our composition of our piece. How many petals are going to go outside the page? Where do they go outside the page? Look at the negative space versus the positive space. Where to put the black gesso. How do we make an active line? I'll talk more about that and how important that is. Talk about hard edges and soft edges and watercolor. Yeah, lots and lots of stuff to talk about. And then here I added more colors with the color pencil too. And I added color pencil over the watercolor on this one too, not just the black gesso.
That's cool. Yeah. Earlier when we first started this live session, everyone was pretty much curious about the alternatives we could use about gesso, but right now I think we kind of like are understanding why gesso is a thing and why we chose gesso right here. So
yeah, I did. I've done quite a few paintings where this way with ink. And once I started using the black gesso, just the color pencil. If you don't add color pencil, ink works great. It's just that I found that there were just some areas that the color pencil just would not go over cleanly like it does the black gesso.
I see. Gotcha. Which brings us to Carol's question earlier. Is it possible to make your own black gesso with white gesso plus black ink or white gesso plus acrylic? I think the acrylic you were answered by Kimberly. Again, Kim, let us know in our Facebook group how you did that mixture. But ink and white gesso. Any thoughts on that, Tina?
Um, I would think that it wouldn't be as black because it's white, and
Right.
you're going to be making a gray. But I haven't tried it, so I don't know. So that's pretty interesting
Yeah.
to think about. Um, Black gesso isn't that expensive. I'm wondering if ink would be more expensive, than just buying the black gesso. If you buy just a little bottle of black gesso, that's going to last you for years because you
Right.
really don't put that much on the paper. You saw that I just used what was in the lid.
Right.
Just what was in the lid. That's all I needed. So you're not using a lot at all. So
Yeah.
I would say just get the black gesso, but I understand that you just want to use what you have.
Right, right. Like Bev said, more materials. I guess you're stuck in that loop. All right, we've got interesting question from Sasha. Love this. Any special cleansing with brushes after gesso?
I do recommend not using your fine watercolor brushes for your black gesso, but you can clean it out. Use the pink soap that's called what is it called?
Is
It's
that
just a pink brush conditioner, and you can find it anywhere. I think it's Mona Lisa. It has a picture of the Mona Lisa on it. I think it is called Mona Lisa, but I use that, and that will get out. But gosh, that black gesso is going to be getting up into the ferrule of your brush, and
yeah.
it is an acrylic type base. And if you can, have two separate brushes, but I do understand if you don't have that, but you could clean them. I would say clean them out right away with that. And then also use clean water when you're doing your watercolor. Don't use the water that you cleaned your black gesso
Yeah.
out with.
Gotcha. All right. We've got also from Sasha, a little metallic would be interesting. Have you tried metallic colors? Oh.
Yes, I have. And
Oh
oh my
wow.
gosh. Yes. If you get, I know Winsor Newton has a iridescent where you can add iridescent to any of your colors, and it makes it sparkle. So you could add that and have any of your colors sparkle, and that over the black gesso, I've splattered just the iridescent medium over, and it has the silver look, which is kind of cool. So yep. And what I want to experiment with, I haven't done yet, is the gold leaf. Putting
Oh,
gold leaf on it.
yeah.
See, that's going to be the next thing. We're going to have to do that. See, when you start adding things like this to your watercolor, it just opens up doors
Right.
to new things, and it kind of gets you thinking, just like you guys are here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aw. All right, we've got from Larry this time. Interesting. The methods are interesting. I use color pencils on top of watercolor to enhance the colors, contrast, and the values. But he's also interested in learning more about colored pencils on top of gesso. Is that something we could look forward to for the next class, Tina?
Well, I mean, we're already doing a little bit of that here. We can even talk more. I mean, just imagine if we have time in the workshop, because I'm telling you, 90 minutes just goes by way, way, way too fast. If you just imagine if you put leaves in the background, drew some leaves in the background here. I actually have a piece here. I don't know if you can
Yeah, I could.
where I
Oh,
drew
wow.
in leaves with the color pencil for the background.
Yeah, that looks
And
amazing.
so you can do that. And then all this here, right here, all the stuff that I have back here has black gesso and color pencil in it. So there's all kinds of things that you can do with that. I've done a barn scene where the inside of the barn I painted with the black gesso and then drew um, bales of hay and stuff that's it just with line in the doors, just to add just that little bit of detail to it. So yeah, it's just opening up a whole another thing. Mixed media
Right.
is wonderful. Mm-hmm.
Yes, definitely. And that's something that really would be looking forward to, Carol. Like she mentioned, she asked rather. Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, Kathy is asking that with the black gesso opacity is amazing. Would this technique work with gouache at all? Just curious.
Oof, I don't know.
Another thing to explore.
With gouache. Okay. The only experience I have with gouache is using it, using the white to bring back a white or as splatters as we did here, or even mixing it with my watercolor to tint the gouache to add dynamic to my pieces. So that is the only black gouache. Black gouache, I think doing it over like this, it might have more of a chalky look to it because it's
Right.
so big of an area. It's going to, I think it's still going to give you that tooth, just like we were talking about. But when I spray the black gesso with the archival varnish, it looks so nice and flat, and the texture of that paper comes back, and it's so opaque and so black. And I'm thinking that that's a gouache would be chalky. That would be my first thought, but I don't know.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I guess again, that's one thing left for us to explore. And if you do explore those kinds of stuff, please do let us know. The private Facebook group is open to those kinds of interesting discoveries. So yeah, and I'm gonna be dropping some things in the chat. And Bev has mentioned, or a question from Bev earlier. Do you think Gesso are available for what? I mean, are there any available colors for Gesso?
Yes, there's gray, white, and black. That's all that I
Oh,
know.
okay.
But that doesn't mean that that's all that's out there. I'm pretty
Right.
sure it is, but you guys are having all these really good questions for me. Now I need to research. I tried the gray because at first I thought, oh, gray would be really cool. I
Right.
just didn't like it. Um, but man, I really should probably look into it again. It just didn't work in the piece that I was trying at first. I did not like it at all, actually. So if anybody, I would love to see people experiment with that. If they think that gray would work, maybe it was my topic that I was using, or that it just didn't work, or maybe it was the combination of how much percentage of black and white of the paper and the gray, if
Right.
that percent just wasn't working. So it could have been my composition. It just, as soon as I put it down, it was like, no, this isn't what I'm wanting at this
Right.
time. But it is out there.
Yeah, and people are dropping other colors that they saw. Catherine says gold. Teresa says there's a clear gesso online. She's wondering
Yeah,
if
there's
that
a
is for.
clear.
Oh,
There's
wow.
a clear gesso. I do know that. Yep. There is a clear gesso. And I know, and I've done this before where I've taken a watercolor scene that I particularly didn't think uh, that I liked what I was doing with that. And I painted it with the clear gesso. And what it does is it makes like a milky haze over
Oh,
your watercolor. And I added soft pastel over it because it gives you a texture. It's like sandpaper
yeah.
and the pastel. And oh my gosh, that's a great thing to do with
Yeah.
watercolors that just don't, maybe you got a little heavy handed and it's just not working, or maybe you lost your whites, which happens
Right.
all the time with us, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that you can do. You can paint that over and then pastel over top. It's That's a wonderful mixed media.
Great. All right, we've got one more question from an audience right here. Is there an advantage for painting black gesso first rather than last?
Oh, good question. I usually do my watercolor first and then paint my black gesso, is what I
Oh.
usually do. But for this high contrast and to get this done in the time that we had,
Hmm.
this was the leaf was just white, um, yeah. But
Right.
and so I usually do it after. But I think I've been teaching for quite a while here, and I think to get um, the idea of a good line and the way the black gesso should go through the piece, I think it comes across better to teach it when we have white paper, so that you're getting that in your head that the black has to have a good shape to it. And
Gotcha.
I think teaching wise, this is the best way to do it. But in my own
Mm.
work, I usually add it after. Good
I see. I see.
question. Oh my gosh, these are good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And apparently I think that's pretty much it though. You've filled us so much with a lot of interesting questions, and a lot of ideas actually. The audience is right now, I think you're all left wanting to paint. So that is good. All
Well, that's
right.
good. That's good. I also wanted to say that this is a more contemporary way of doing
Right.
watercolor. It's fresh. It's something that people usually don't see, and a lot of people out there that they say, "Oh, watercolor, it's not as dynamic as oil painting or as acrylics or pastels." Well, watercolor can be dynamic, and we do know this. And I think that this is one way to show that yes, us watercolor people can make dynamic pieces just like oil paintings
Yeah.
can be. So, um, and so I just wanted to add that little bit to that. I know that a lot of younger people are more go more towards something that's new like this. So this
Right.
is a way that we can kind of freshen our watercolor up and to get us excited about watercolor again. Sometimes we get tired, right? So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very refreshing, and I'm glad that you pointed that out as well. Okay, so I think now it's time to wrap up now that I don't see much questions. But if you do have, don't hesitate to type them in a chat or message Tina if you're too shy. She's definitely available for more questions. All right,
Definitely.
everyone. All right, now that our time is up, I hope you enjoyed your time with Etcher Studio, Tina, and thank you everybody for your active participation. We do these live demos a couple of times a week, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you have loved what you have watched today, click on the like button below and also fill out the survey form. So let us know what you want to learn in the future. But Tina will definitely serve you more of these in a couple of her cycles. So it's going to be really interesting, not just botanicals. We're going to be offering you more or different subjects. So you definitely can apply this to other subjects that you'll be doing. And we have, again, if you followed along and you want to post your work, post that on our private Facebook group. I'll be flashing that on our screen if you're not part of that yet. There you go. And speaking of our private Facebook group, we have another open art studio coming up this June 5, 12 p.m. Eastern time. So time to make more art and connect with other people. Tina has joined a couple of open art studios before. So who knows, maybe you would be able to catch Tina for another open art studio. But don't worry, if you won't be able to attend this one coming up, we'll have more scheduled on this on June rather. So make sure to check out our private Facebook group for announcement about that. And let's see. Very interesting mix of techniques. Awesome as always. Absolutely spot on. Thank you. Awesome demo. Great demo. Thanks so much. All right. I think everybody loved it.
Good.
Any final thoughts, Tina, before we close the session?
All I can say is to experiment with this and go ahead and set up more than one. I would do even doing them at the same time where you're waiting for some things to dry and go on to another one. Put on some music that you enjoy and just have a fabulous day watercoloring and using this Black Gesso and colored pencil. So thank you so much for joining us. Love it. I love to share what I'm doing.
Great. And like I've mentioned, I'm flashing it on the screen. That's June 28th, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Tina's 90-minute class. That's going to be on our YouTube channel. So make sure to catch that on our time zone so that you'll be able to see it live. All right. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you, Tina, for another lovely demonstration.
Thanks.
And until next time, make more art. Bye for now.